Management Research. Hello and welcome to the Management Research podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Eugene. Hello and welcome to the next episode in our mini-series about psychological games as postulated by Eric Berne. In our previous episode, we talked about three entities that live within our head. These are the parent ego state, the adult ego state, and the child ego state. And we also had an example, I think would be great to have two different voices, but only with my voice, where you can find this conversation happening between two people, and with my explanation why a certain conversation would be a conversation between, let's say, a parent and a child, or between a parent and a parent. In his theory, Eric Berne suggested that we have these three entities and the three entities on the other side. So the one is the agent and the second one is the recipient in a conversation, and both the agent and the recipient, they have these three entities within their head. And when they start communicating, they try to get with their message to the one of the ego states on the other side. For instance, if I'm going to give you order, I will try to connect to your child within your personality, and I would try to behave as a parent. So the conversation happens in the following way. The agent sends you a signal that he or she wants to talk to you, and you as recipient, you can accept this invitation and say you just respond to this one and continue conversation, or you say I cannot, or I have no time, or you just do not respond, and then the conversation doesn't happen. So there is no transactional analysis that we can apply to the conversation because there are no transactions. But after the invitation happened and both parties started involving into communication, they almost immediately and at a certain level of this ego states, who is talking to whom. So to be either two parents talking to each other, or two adults, or two kids, or parent and kid. And Eric Berne suggested that the conflicts are the incongruent mode of relationship, if I simplify it. We have some congruent ways of relationships. The parents, they feel well where they have to talk to other parents, and there are usually very seldom if there are conflicts at this level. So the parents are discussing something, being a bit higher than the kids, being more clever, being more wise, and they talk about somebody else. About the kids can be somebody talking about the friends, or managers talking about the employees, whatever it is. The conversation between two adults is also a very congruent conversation and works fine. The same applies to the conversation between two children, two kids. When they provoking each other, they're playing, and this is a kind of congruent way of talking to each other. And finally, the fourth congruent way to talk to each other that we know is the one between the parent and the kid. The parent usually knows what to say because he or she is more wise and has more experience, and the kid has to follow. So these conversations are working fine. And if you think about conversations that worked well, if you just try to remember them, these were those where you talked as two adults, or as two parents, or as two kids, or as parent and kid. But he said the conflicts appear if the incongruent way of communication happens, and the most obvious incongruent way is the one between the parent and the adult. Because the adults, they want to be treated as adults, they want to be thinking, analytical people. They want to be those who are, let's say, experienced enough and old enough to speak to them. And the parents are those who try to give suggestions, who try to explain. And when they can explain to their kids, they cannot explain something to the adults. And if you think about most of the conflicts that you observe in families, it's the puberty period when kids start becoming adults, and they want to be treated as adults because they have different level of maturity. They understand that they become different and they want to be treated as adults. But the parents still treat them as kids, and this leads to a conflict because the one party is not accepting the way of communication the other party, the recipient or the agent, is proposing. So very often they want to be talked to as adults when parents try to talk to them as kids. this is not only the issue within the families, this is also the issue within the firm. If one of the employees, he or she thinks he is a manager and tries to talk to employees, and the employees don't have this feeling of superiority, and they want to be talked to as thinking people, they want to be understood, and they want to discuss an issue, and they don't want to be told what they have to do, then you have immediately a problem. This is the same problem when during the puberty period parents try to tell their kids how they have to behave, this parent-child behavior. And the, let's say, not anymore children, they do not accept this level of communication, and the conflict appears. So the same conflicts appear also within your firm, or can appear with your friends. The second incongruent way of communication is the one between the adults and the children. Because the adults try to argue, adults try to explain. Kids, they don't want to argue, they want to play. They want to engage in some provoking behavior, they want to do something for fun, they want to try something out. And if you as an adult know it is dangerous activity, you tell them, so the parent would tell them just not to do it and just prohibit it. But the adult might try to explain and try to argue and explain why it is the bad case, but it is not what a kid wants to hear. And that is why he or she will just start crying and start being misunderstood and start making scandals. This is what happens if one tries to behave as an adult and the other one is not ready and still behaves as a kid. That is why next time you try to argue with the kids, think twice. It will depend on the age, it will also depend on what exactly you want to achieve and whether your kid is ready for this type of relationship, whether the kid is really in this puberty state where he or she is wanting to be treated as an adult. But the same will happen within the firm if you try to talk as adult to somebody who is behaving in an infantilistic or children way. And unfortunately, we still have many people within our organizations who behave in this way. There are reasons for this, and this would be the topic of our next episode when we're going to talk about the psychological games. Anyway, if you try to engage in this type of behavior, where you try to talk to people as an adult, and they behave as if they're kids, so the kid in them is behaving, so it is actually impulsive, emotional behavior. Remember, we talked about this children ego state, that it is a felt concept. It is the emotional type of self. Then the conflicts will appear. The same as with a small kid on a courtyard where the parent, instead of just telling what to do, what not to do, tries to argue and tries to explain the position and listen to the position of the kid who is not really prepared to talk about any position, who did it just for fun. Only applying this knowledge, you should be able to explain several conflicts that happened within your firm, or that happened within your family, or that happened with your friends. If you could apply it and learn from it, drop me a comment. I would be interested to know whether somebody could find something useful in this explanation. In the next episode, we are going to talk about the psychological games, and later we're going to apply these games and learn about some specific games that you can avoid. I hope it was interesting, and I wish you all the best, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.